So this man, Reverend Mary Morrissey tells the story of this man who goes into a bank, and he says, I have a check, I'd like to cash it. And so the teller says, well, yeah, great, go ahead, sign the back of it, and I'll give you the money. And he says, well, I'm not going to do that. What if I sign it, and I give it to you, and you don't give me the money? What's going to happen? And so he picked up his check and didn't even stay for coffee and cookies and went to the next bank. And they said the same thing, if you're going to submit the check, you need to sign the back of it and put your name to it. We'll know who you are and we'll exchange that for money. And they said, sorry, with our policies and procedures, you have to be sure and sign it so that then we can process it. And he says, well, I'm not going to do that. I don't trust that that's going to happen. And so finally, the third bank he went to, and he carries in his check, and he talks to the teller. And after humma for a while, the teller reaches across the counter and hits him with like a rubber bat and says, now sign the darn check. And so he kind of wakes up and he says, okay, I'll sign it. And boom, he exchanged it and he gave him the funds. And so he went back to the first bank and he says, I got the money. And the teller said, well, you probably had to sign the back of the check, didn't you? And he said, yes, but I had never been explained. It had never been explained to me in those terms. And so sometimes we need to put our name to things. We need to be committed and to put our name to something and know that there's an exchange, knowing that there's faith and trust in a universe that's supporting us, and that we can be for things and knowing that things are not against us. And Dr. Ernest Holmes talked about that we live in a universe that is for us and not against us. That we live in this universe where there's some universal principles and practices that we can apply in our daily life. And so much like the teller of the bank, the teller was authorized to give those funds, and it just happened the way that it happened. And so when we're in harmony with the universe, we live in this universe that says, yes, I'm authorized to give you exactly what that is. And so we can look at our role and what we play and how we trust and move forward in faith rather than based in fear. So life is for us and never against us. So as we live in this universe and as we look at the questions and answers about this teaching and how it provides, much like Freddie already provided an answer for us, it is we who would constrict or constrain our life. Or we may come from a sense of limitation that I go to the teller and I'm limited. Or I go to the teller and I keep my agreement. And so it's much like Mother Teresa saying that I'll be about peace when you stop saying anti-war. We're not anti, or we're not repelling or resisting, but we're for peace. And so we get to move in this theme of peace. We're sowing seeds of peace, this theme in December. We've had sowing seeds of different themes, and so we're about peace. And isn't that good during the holidays? And that as we can also remind ourselves that we can live from the inside out. So we can trust and move forward in faith and know that we are consciously living from the inside out. And I think I learned that from Emerson. I'd have to go back and look and have picked things up along the way, but Ralph Waldo Emerson is really good. And it comes from a long lineage in our history about how we can transcend our circumstances and live from the inside out and transcend whatever those circumstances are. And so Ken Johnson is celebrating Holly Holm today, and she's a champion. She's a martial artist. She's also been a professional boxer and a kickboxer, and now she's a local. She's the ultimate fighting champion hero. And so we get to celebrate in those areas that we're champions in our life too, and to know that when we're in harmony, much like Ken will be playing, is it a parade that he's playing for? So in Civic Plaza, so it's like we're sending forth that harmony, we're sending forth that moment of celebration. In December too, we're also in a season of light and of love. And I just also wanted to touch on Hanukah, because it's the first day of celebrating Hanukah and the Festival of Lights. And so as we move forward, it's about a rededication. And so what the people did was they rededicated themselves to a holy temple. They rededicated their life. And so we can look in our lives and bring that to everyday wisdom, everyday knowledge, and apply that and say, what am I rededicating my life to in this moment? So that as we move through some of these questions and answers too, we're rededicating our life. So I just want to take a moment and ask you to close your eyes and allow us to rededicate our life to spirit. As Kamatara says, to be big love, to be light, to be enlightened and enlivened and awakened. And to just ask myself, what am I rededicating my life to today? And now I invite you to open your eyes and to know that the lens through which we look is one that is filled with that love and that light that we just experienced in this moment together. And we're also in a season of awakening and coming from a place of being more enlightened. And so as we lighten up in this season of light, we get to celebrate Bodhi Day and awakening in our magnificence. And so the Festival of Lights is observed as that kindling of lights, and there's that unique candelabrum, much like that, but we're even more prolific over there. And it's for happiness, for health, for success, for our loved ones. It's for our beloveds. And so there's those 8 days and those 8 branches of rededication. So as we look at this forthcoming week, what are we dedicating our life each day to? And so you can have not only 7 days this week, you can have 8. And to know that there's, we're creative spellers anyways. But we can take those moments throughout this coming week and rededicate our lives. And so Bodhi Day is also a dedication to our awakening and to be in the moment when we're with family, when we're with friends, when we're in the stillness, when we can know that there's that Bodhi, that experience of enlightenment. And so Siddhartha Gautama experienced this enlightenment or nirvana, and he experienced an awakening. And to know that we have those moments of awakening throughout our day. And so it commemorates, Bodhi Day commemorates the experience of this awakening. And so we can choose to commemorate and celebrate those moments of awakening in our own way, because we each have our own style. And we get to appreciate our own style and acceptance even deeper of our self-worth, of our own style of communicating, of our own style of listening during this time. And so what Buddha was listening to is the spiritual essence, or that spiritual presence, that presence which was arising amongst whatever those circumstances or conditions were. And then at the same time, there was a cessation, or what was ceasing was that noisiness of condition, or the noisiness of something that may not look like an insight, something that may be condition-based or fear-based thinking. He began to move forward in that awakening of his heart and to be of that spiritual essence. And in modern times, some of those Eastern philosophies has taken on more of a meaning to be true to ourselves, to live from our authentic and genuine self and share genuine love and peace and bliss. And so it also comes as self-realization. We have a new realization about ourselves in that awakening. And so what's no longer serving is that which is ceasing to be, and that we then have insights in those awakenings. And so I invite us to have those insights and that rededication. And I just wanted to give you that nugget to take with you, because it's juicy to be in the spiritual essence during this time. And if you haven't already signed up for the Wednesday night, Navigating Your Inner Journey, there'll be more discussion and deepening on that path. So we get to honor our own path. We get to honor our own essence. And so Freddies Answer. Thank you, Freddie. Christina Fritchie. She says an answer right here, and it has a heart, and it has a smile with an exclamation point, for the eyes. She says, the teaching is thorough. while on great pursuits, the reorganization of the self, just what I was talking about, that genuine, that true self, that realized self, while on great pursuits, the reorganization of the self is made complete, and heaven comes to reality where all is good, where all good is realized here and now, with a heart and a smile. Freddie, I just wanted to acknowledge you for that answer. And so I ask myself, well, what do I want to be about? What do I love? What do I love most? And how do I bring that into the here and now? What do I love most throughout this rededication and throughout these awakenings of insights? What do I love? What do I love most? What would I love? So again, I want us to just close our eyes for just a second and ask ourselves, what would I love? So in this season of light and love, what would I love? And then looking forward into the next year, what would I love? And thank you for that. Know that we can continue that inner dialogue and conversation. It might be vibrant health. It might be a fulfilling, even more fulfilling relationship. It might be just going to that teller of life and saying, yes, I'm abundant and I know it to be so. I feel and know that good things are happening. And so our next question is, what's first cause and who's on first? I think I know who wrote this, who's on first. So what's first cause? So we're free to choose, but we're not free from the consequences of our choices. So there's some universal laws and principles. There's some principles, and then we have spiritual practices to work with these principles. And we have practices here like meditation and affirmative prayer and visioning and self-study and being of service and wonderful areas where we can enhance our lives and empower our lives using this law that we can absolutely count on. And it's much like that Taylor story. It says yes. It says yes. And so as we begin to say yes to life, it begins to say yes more and more to us. So it echoes back, it mirrors, it reflects back, which we plant into it and comes to fruition. And so one of the things is we can look at our life as either being a spectator up in the stands, or we might be watching a football game on TV. We did a lot of that during Thanksgiving. I did watch some football. So we can watch it through the TV. We can actually go to the game. We can also participate. So, for instance, my dad was a football coach, and so not only did he play the game, but he also became a coach. And then he also became part of the USC coaches, Trojan Coaches Club and all that kind of thing. And then a lot of them became owners of the team. And so we can play at different levels in our life and to use these principles and practices to, in essence, come out of that stand of life and to use these principles and practices that say, yes, I'm going to play the game into the end zone, even if I have long hair like some of those football players. I don't know how they play football with that long hair. I don't know how. I mean, it's incredible. Anyways, I digress. So I'm such a football fan. So to know that I can use those principles in playing the very best game possible, and to know that I'm already involved, I'm engaged in that game already. And I'd heard something this week that's also valuable, that people who may be unsuccessful seek opinions. They seek validation or they seek opinions about things, but people who are successful in using these universal principles seek counsel. So that may be counsel of the divine. So I go into meditation, I may have that divine partnering as I land in that essence, and as I'm grounded in that essence, as I make these daily choices. And then I have consequences that are part of those choices. And so Dr. Ernest Holmes says about love and law. And so it's about love, it's about moving forward in faith, rather than whatever fear-based that we may have been brought up with, or that we may see a lot of, because not everyone may have this teaching. So about love and law, he writes in his book, Love and Law, that poverty is an abnormal condition. So somebody asked about why do bad things happen? War, child abuse, rape, poverty. So he says that poverty is an abnormal condition, that poverty is a result of inefficiency. Poverty is not the result of lack of opportunity. Remember how I talked about that constraint? We have opportunity rather than constraint or being constricted. So we get to realize that, yes, we can be expanded and have opportunity. So poverty is not the result of lack of opportunity, because we have opportunities in our life to have more optimal health, to have fulfilling relationships, to have an even more abundant realization of our ever-expanding and harmonizing prosperity in our life. He says, not in yourself, not anyway. Poverty is the result of inefficiency or ignorance. And if you and I can learn to deal with the only mind that there is, which I believe he's talking about the loving source, that there's oneness instead of separation. So as I look at these conditions and experiences, they're a lot about separation. And we'll get into that in just a minute. He says, and if you and I can learn to deal with the only mind that there is, we will no longer be poor. We can attract to ourselves people and things that will obliterate poverty. We have an event that's coming in April, and it's pretty fantastic. It's Lisa Ferraro and Erica Luckett, and they'll be here on Wednesday, April 27th. And we're like the sandwich. I said, why don't you stop by here Wednesday on your way to Abiquiu, to Ghost Ranch, to do a Circle of Love event, which is the big doing, well, some of the big doings in the New Thought movement, where people can go to retreat and experience music and have spiritual experiences, much like Bodhi Day and those awakening experiences, and more lightness and light in our lives. And then they'll stop by Santa Fe on their way home on that Sunday. And so in talking with someone, they were saying, well, I don't know if I'll have the funds to go. And I said, are you saying that in April, you're projecting out that you're not going to have the funds to go? And the universe, much like the teller of the universe, may say, yes, okay, you will not have the resources to go. And so they're already placing their order. They're already placing their order. I say, are you really setting that up for yourself to not go? And it's such a wonderful opportunity and it's gonna have such a beautiful evolution in spilling over into our daily lives. I wouldn't want to start saying no to something that's going to be now, in 5 months. We can set ourselves up for this very success. And I have another story about. And I'll get back to the bad and the good. There was a gentleman who was standing in line at the ticket office of Pope Joy Theater down here. And his girlfriend had wanted him to buy season tickets. And he didn't feel he had the resources. And so what happened was, he says, well, I'm going to get there as soon as the box office opens. And he didn't know how he was going to have the resources to buy season tickets for his girlfriend for the holidays. And so what he did was he got there right as the dawn was breaking, because he knew the box office was going to be open, much like that teller window. They're going to be open. That inner doorway and that outer doorway is going to be open, right? We have these inner doorways and outer doorways that we can walk through. So he got there to the very front of this box office. And he began to say, well, I'm happy to help. If someone wants to buy a ticket, I can go ahead and purchase that for you and get it to you. And so this one man says, sure, yeah, I got to be at work pretty soon. I got to be at work. Let me do that. And here, let me give you the money, and let me give you $10 on top of that. And he says, great, I'll deliver that to your office. And there were people at the back of the line who thought that they weren't going to be able to get a ticket either because they were experiencing their limitation. And so what they did was they went to him and said, wow, would you be the conduit? Would you be that avenue through which I could get the best seats? I want to get the best seats too. So they in turn gave them money for the ticket and then $10 on top of that ticket. And by the time he got up to the front window, it's sort of like standing in line for Alma. Did anyone go to Alma? You had to go like a day ahead in order to get in line for this beautiful hug that is so memorable. Anyways, he was there, and people kept coming from the back of the line to pay him to purchase their tickets so that they didn't lose out. And not only did he have enough money to purchase his and his girlfriend's ticket, but he had enough money to purchase some school, some tuition. He was getting ready to register for next school season and didn't have the resources to do that. And who knew when he woke up that morning that that's what would transpire for him? It just came. Sometimes we don't know how things are going to come. He didn't know how he was going to give his girlfriend and he this experience for season tickets. But he listened, and he asked, and he believed, and he received. And so back to setting ourselves up, we don't want to be the person who says, no, I'm not going to have any funds or resources in April, and no, I'm not going to be able to experience that. So Ernest Holmes says that it's up to you, that we're confronted with revealing the truth that poverty is lack of knowledge of God. And what he got to do is be of service. Remember I talked about those spiritual practices. He got to be of service. And if we had complete realization, back to that self-realization of our true selves, our true nature, those spiritual qualities, if we had complete realization of the allness of good and our oneness with God, we would automatically express abundance. It's the very same thing I heard Marianne Williamson talk about, that it's not that we don't believe in love, but it's that we don't believe in love only. That there's a power for good that's ever available to us. And so the knowledge that God wants us to live fully, and the certainty that there's no force that keeps our good from us. Those tellers didn't keep the good from this person. They finally found a way to comply with whatever that law was that they subscribed to and those policies. Same thing with Pope Joy, with having those season tickets. There was a way. And so there's assurance that as we use this knowledge, as we use this teaching, we have those assurances that there's something working forward, coming together for our greatest and highest good, no matter how it looks sometimes. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about some background I have in this next question. And so, why do bad things happen? War, child abuse, rape, poverty, addiction. So I touched on briefly a little bit about separation, or being in a fear-based culture, rather than moving forward from the sense of big love. And when I worked with Prevent Child Abuse Arizona, it's a national nonprofit, and there were 42 different chapters, and it was on a national level. And there's about a quarter of our population that's affected by this, and then also there's about a third of the population that's affected by domestic violence. And so I'd helped write some governor's grants, some grants for prevention. And so it's complex. There's some emotional issues that are imbalanced, and it runs through generations. And so that's the way that people have seen the pattern unfold. And so there's an imbalance. And so there's attachment issues too. People become attached. Remember I talked about living from inside versus living from what's outside in those experiences? So there's profound care and nurturing that needs to happen with those imbalances. Profound caring and nurturing. And people are experiencing a separation from God, whether it's in war, child abuse, rape, poverty, addiction. And what we get to realize as practitioners, we're all practitioners in this room of the Science of Mind teaching, a guide for spiritual living, we get to realize that we have oneness and connection in spirit, and that it is a loving spirit, and that spirit is sufficient to meet all of our needs. And where the separation comes from is that we feel that insufficiency, and we notice how patterns show up in those families. And so what we know from the experience, let's take addiction for just a minute. What we know is that each and every person has whatever purpose in their life, and each and every person is touched by something that goes on in their life. And we get to grow through that and have that profound nurturing and that profound care with ourselves. And to know, as we just talked about Bodhi Day, that craving can have a cessation. It can stop. And so as we have that sense of separation diminish, and that as we increase and amplify our connection, that sense of oneness, that we have that consciousness and that realization of truth. And so I know that, for instance, if we go back to child abuse, the common thread that seems to be present is a lack of self-identity. And we talked a little bit about self-realization and truth. And so there's facts, and then there's the truth with a capital T. And yes, there's some facts about war. Yes, there's some facts about people who have forgotten who they are and how to love and how to care and be of that profound nurturing presence. The common thread seems to be in cases of child abuse and domestic violence and addictions, that there's a lack of that identity. And John Bradshaw, who does a lot of this work for many years, says there's a loss of the I amness. And the I am being a capital I am, that presence, that essence, that truth with a capital T. There's a loss. And so yes, we may be experiencing some pain. We may be experiencing some loss of dignity, or whatever that genuine love that we know is pure and untouched by spirit that lies at our core, our very core. And so our work begins with diffusing the past and explaining the consciousness, explaining that this is the way that consciousness can work, so that those conditions no longer exist throughout generations. So there's no power in that past. When this is understood, we can begin to forgive. We can begin to have that sense of self-worth and that spiritual nature be amplified and magnified even more. And it follows that we get to instill that awareness. We get to be that catalyst for ourselves and for others. We have that self-awareness, the self-realization, that there's that giving and receiving of love as this presence of life. And it begins to be even more life-affirming and life-giving and receiving, and that there's reciprocity. And so that then we begin to express our authentic self even more, that truth with a capital T, no matter what those facts are. We begin to express and be more fully expressed in those areas. And so Ernest Holmes says further that all the thoughts and emotions we've experienced since we came into conscious existence. We're conscious, we're here, we're aware, we're self-aware, we're awakening like the Buddha, we're awakening like that rededication in Hanukah. All the thoughts and emotions we have experienced since we came into conscious awareness are still present in mind. And they begin to manifest themselves, as well as all of our responses to life and experiences. So we get to respond in a new way, in a more self-aware way, and be those examples. And it's Henry David Thoreau who says, I want to learn to live in such a way that when I come to the end of my life, I don't find out that I have not really lived. So I've been hanging out a little bit with Emerson, a little bit with Thoreau, because I want to live to that juicy marrow of our core. And to know that as there's that sense of aliveness and that which is life-affirming within us, that we can have that base of faith, much like those ticket sales that were already in store, and that were ever available to people, and that provided the shoulders on which to stand to be that pillar of light and have enough. And so that was the experience of the enoughness of the person who went to the teller in these universal laws that it is done unto us as we believe, as Jesus the Christ, who is a way shower and an example, not the exception, but an example for us as a way shower of life. That yes, we can believe, we can ask, and we can receive in that. And so there's this distinction between the fact and the truth with a capital T. And so as we have fear-based thinking, we may say that, next time something that happens that looks to be bad in our life, we may say, oh my gosh, that just appears to be something that's bad. I'm disappointed, or I'm disheartened, or that feels really awful. We then get to stop for a moment and engage our spiritual practices of this teaching, like being with family, like being with friends, whatever that is. We get to stop for just a moment and pause. And sometimes I'll do this, like Thursdays and Fridays are a real good day for me to catch up on what may have been earlier in the week. I might have had my hair on fire type of week. Have you ever had your hair on fire type of thing? So sometimes I'll just press that pause button and I'll say, wow, I'm gonna work through this, and I'm gonna approach it with curiosity. I'm gonna approach it with curiosity of finding the good in what's here. And I may not do it exactly in that moment, but I may table it for Thursday and Friday and move through that process and that progress. Because as I move through that and use my spiritual principles and practices, I get to then pause, either be still or journal or call a friend or read or walk, have that sense of mindfulness and being fullness of that one mind back into oneness rather than separation. I get to engage those practices. And so there's a distinction between fact and truth. And it's much like I'm curious about what's the possible good. I get to be curious. What's possibly good about this? And I know that there's, much like in Thessalonians in 5:18, St. Paul says, give thanks in all things. He doesn't say give thanks for all things. He says give thanks in all things. And there's a difference. It's the very same thing of having faith of spirit, rather than having faith just in spirit, but it's moving forward having faith of spirit. And there's a difference. And so, who gives thanks for pain or for disappointments? Well, I can give thanks in those things. I may not give thanks for those things. So we do that. We do that here. And we use our awareness, we use the presence, we bring our presence of mind and heart and soul to every circumstance, and we can activate our potential. We can, again, ask ourselves, what do I love? We can go back inside and say, I can do that now, and then postpone what those disappointments look like and be curious about them when time's appropriate. So I don't have to, in essence, panic or come from that fear-based thing in the very moment. But I know I have that stature and capacity, and that I'm intact, and that I'm whole, and that I'm complete as spirit with a sense of oneness, and approach it from curiosity and from oneness. So it's not that I deny what I'm feeling right now about these things, about these questions that I become curious about, but knowing that there's already answers in that storehouse of good, much like the teller or the ticket box office. And so if I'm not in the mood to be thankful in all things, what I can do is I can just know what I'm feeling right now in the situation that I face, and face it, and I can give it my full attention and my awareness. And I can just accept that I'm not in a place to do that, where I can give thanks for much of anything sometimes, right? And so what I do is I give myself some time. I might say, okay, hair on fire on Monday, let's deal with it later on. And I know that there's a healing and a revealing of the wholeness and the truth with a capital T that's taking place. And I had a friend of mine years ago who, he didn't listen to his mom, and he put his hand on a stove. Well, yeah, there were consequences for his actions. He didn't listen to what his mom said, was keep your hands off that stove. And yes, it healed, but he got to learn and to grow from that wisdom and that awakening and those insights that, yeah, that didn't work. And yeah, it was painful. And yeah, it was disappointing at that time. And so the pain subsided. It subsided. And what I know is that as I begin to feel that something greater is happening, that there's a greater good, that the highest and best in divine unfoldment is happening, that's what we're up to. That's what we're up to with this teaching. And a friend of mine is also doing some couples counseling, and she calls it emotionally focused. And so that, we come with this whole set of emotions, and so what people do is, and I'd studied Gestalt like years ago, we come back to our wholeness. We come back, and it's more about what's the emotions that we're working through. And then we have some wonderful tools and practices so that it doesn't have to show up as these particular conditions. We get to break that pattern and to set a new divine pattern unfolding, and to know that we're making a difference generations down the way from the choices that we make today. I like how that sounds. So I know, I've been there. And so it's much like having that ground wire of electricity. We have lights, and we know that without the ground wire, that it may not work. But we know that there's a current. There's a current. There's a power that's already flowing through things. Yes, but we have the ground wire. We have that living from truth. And as we live more from truth rather than from facts, we begin to have that capacity and our potential and our gifts unfold from a higher and greater place that provides us even more harmony with the universal presence and essence. So I know that out of these principles and practices, much like Emerson, we can really live, and that we can really live from this very core. So we can continue to ask ourselves, what do I love? What do I love? Does anyone else have a question today that they want to? I think we have 5 minutes, maybe 2 or 3 questions or answers. Thanks to Freddie. Thank you again. And then I want to go through some of the upcoming holiday celebrations where we can be in community and love together. And if anyone wants to share what they do love, too, feel free to do that. We have a microphone. Yes. Okay, we can share this in the social hall. We can share one-on-one, and I'm looking forward to that. I also wanted to include a metta prayer, and because in these times, it gives us that place of the Bodhi, it gives that place of awakening. And so there's a metta prayer that we can share that comes from Buddhism and in the season of light, and just knowing that we're rededicated to that. So I invite us to go ahead and read this for ourselves. So may all beings be free. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings awaken to the light of their true nature. May all beings be free. So I'm trusting that we're a bit more free in this very moment. And so I invite us to turn within for just this moment as we have an affirmative prayer and that which elevates our awareness. And as we rise up in this conscious place of pure potentiality and fullness of our capacity. So there is this place of the infinite, which is providing and knowing that there is that friendship of the divine partnership already. And coming from this place of faithfulness, of the presence, of the one love, of the oneness, of the joy, of the immense infusion of this divine energy, of this sourceful energy. There is that which is resourceful and filled with love, light, peace, joy, the complete and whole presence, that which is well and in and through as everything and everyone. I absolutely know that I am connected, much like that ground wire of the electricity, much like the presencing of this joy in this moment. There is that which is infused. So being of this divine influx, giving thanks in all things. There is the goodness which is unfolding. There is that which is strong with a profound nurturing and caring of one's authentic self, of my true nature. And I claim and proclaim this and know to be good this very day, and it is fulfilled of the capacity and the infinite potentiality of my life. And it shows up as wellness, of wholeness, of well-being, and basking and being cherished in the love of the divine, and the divine which is so at one and at home in the heart of hearts, being rededicated and refocused as itself made known even more fully and present. In the here and now, it is complete, it is whole, it is well, it is affluent and abundant, and knowing that in this shining opulence, it shines in the season of light, in this complete peace and this knowingness, which is that calm confidence and poised assurance of peacefulness and serenity and tranquility, knowing that there is oneness and fullness of this causation of spirit. And it is that which I rely upon and listen to at all times. And I'm grateful for this community, grateful for these beautiful spiritual principles and practices, and allowing and accepting Spirit to glow and grow through me in this beautiful moment, in this beautiful time. And I release this word into the action of the law, knowing it is fulfilled and complete and whole, and it comes with all of the resources necessary to be made manifest, because it is of Spirit, of the divine already, of the divine in mind and heart and soul already. And so be it, and so I celebrate.